Welcome everybody. Today we're going to be going over the new Apex Polymer Flatty for the M&P series pistol. Now, if there is one mod you could do to a pistol that would absolutely live rent-free up in your mind, it's going to be the Apex flat trigger, because it changes what is a curved, hinged, gnarly trigger mess that comes in your M&P, whether it's 1.0 or a 2.0, and really does make it quite nice. Now, I know the new modern 2.0 has a flat face trigger in it. What I can assure you is it doesn't even come close to what Apex has done with their setup. Now, there is also a lot more that goes into a trigger kit for an M&P than say something like a Glock or some other things out there. And you do have some options as far as how you want that trigger to feel, as far as the pull weight and all that stuff. And there is some helpful information that they will send you should you decide to do the Apex Ultimate Flatty to your M&P. Now, before we get into all the trigger pulls and specs and stuff, a huge shout to Hidden Hybrid Holsters, big supporter of the channel here today. They make that absolutely sweet leather Kydex combo holster. Tons of options out there, whether you want an in the waistband, out of the waistband, they have got something for you. They've even got belts and a couple other cool things like that. So definitely check them out at hiddenhybridholster.com. Well, let's talk about the feel and the performance of this Apex trigger for your M&P. So the tactile feel is going to be so much better than the factory setup on here. You've got a nice flat trigger shoe with a slight hook at the bottom. You've got a very nice wide trigger shoe safety that is going to go sub flush. And as far as that performance goes, you are going to have a drastically reduced take up and reset as far as the overall travel goes in both directions. Now with that, you're also going to get a couple of different springs. You can choose your pull weight to an extent, but it's going to lighten this thing up quite a bit. I've got the heavier spring right around 4 pounds. We'll do a little bit more talking about that once we get into the actual parts and the trigger pulls and stuff. But there's a lot going on with this trigger, and the overall feel and performance is definitely worth what you could end up paying for this thing. Now, the brake on this thing is still going to be very solid with a very defined wall, even though you can get this thing to like 3.5, maybe even a smidge lower with the newer striker system that is in the M&Ps, because they have a different striker angle, which does have to do with how much weight that's gonna feel like. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute, because I have one that has the new striker and one that has the old striker. So something to pay attention to when you start putting these things together. But that performance is definitely going to be there. Now, the reset on this is still audible. It's still very tactile. It's a little bit less than what you would get out of a factory trigger, but by no means you're gonna have any problem finding that reset on that trigger out there on the range. And you can run this thing just stupid fast because it's so short and it's so nice out there. It really does take that thing to the next level. Now, talking a little bit more about how this thing feels out there on the range, you are gonna need to practice with this thing out there. It is a completely different feel than the factory trigger, but in just about every good way it could be. Like I said, this mod will live rent-free in your mind if you don't have one. If your buddy's got one and you use it, you'll probably end up getting one very soon. So it's definitely solid. Like I said, you've got to put some time in with it, because even with the heavier spring, you're gonna be at like 4 pounds, 4.5 pounds. I wanna say the factory trigger is gonna be about 5 to 5.5, some even 6, depending on how broken in they are. So this is going to be a very immediate drop in the feel and the function of that trigger. And it does maintain every single safety in that system, so you don't have to worry about any of that. So once you've got your practice in, you can do whatever you want. You can try those different springs, but just be cognizant of the fact that it is super short, both take up and reset, and it's taken a few pounds off that pull weight. And once you get past the performance and all that good stuff in there and the feel of it, let's just face it, it is flat out a sexy looking trigger. So now that you kind of have a good idea of that, let's go ahead and do some pull tests and talk about the parts that come with this, give you guys an idea, and then talk a little bit about how Apex was able to achieve what they did with this trigger, so you have a really good understanding of what this is going to do to your M&P. And if you're interested in any of that stuff, I will have links at the build list, but we're going to get into this trigger right now. All right, so the new Polymer Apex Flatty right here. We're gonna go ahead and get into this thing. We're gonna talk about the parts, how they were able to achieve what they did, and of course, do those trigger pulls right there. But let's talk about what we get here. First thing out of the bag, you can see right here, we're gonna have this little kind of flow chart looking thing right here. And basically, you can read that. It's gonna dial you in as far as what style and feel and weight of trigger pull you want. However, one thing to pay attention to is there is a new striker in the M&Ps, and you can basically look on the side right here of your striker, and if it says 10%, you have the new version, and it's going to be a little bit different and kind of throw this off. So this is meant for the original 2.0s and 1.0s as far as the weight goes. Now, talking about everything we are going to get in here, as you can see, you will have several options as far as that color goes, and I'm sure they're probably going to have some more. But if you don't remember, this is the gnarly factory trigger shoe right here, that hinge design, which just isn't great. So, is what it is. When it comes to the other parts, I'm going to try not to lose any of these small parts here while I explain them to you. So we'll dump these out. All right. So what we're going to get here are two different weight trigger springs. You're going to see a silver trigger spring and a green trigger spring. And those are going to determine a little bit of your pull weight. And then you're going to have two different sear springs right there. And those are going to help determine your pull weight as well. And then that is going to be your new disconnector right there. So that is what your trigger bar is going to hit to disconnect that sear from the striker. Throw these back in here so we don't lose anything. So the next bag of parts you're going to get is your new striker block safety, your striker block springs, and a little tool to help you get it in there. So this is your little tool to help you install the striker block, which is going to be very nicely recontoured and worked like that. And then you're going to have a new sear, which is fully machined from Apex, and a new striker block spring. So go ahead and put this away. All right, so now that I cleared all that stuff off, let's go ahead and talk about how they were able to achieve this. And we'll break this down and show you. So we all know when we add different springs, that can make things lighter, but there is some other stuff that went into this trigger itself. One of the things you're going to notice right here as compared to stock is you'll see an extended edge on your disconnector from Apex right here. So that closes the distance between where your trigger bar contacts it, therefore making it break a little bit faster. And then they've cleaned up the edges on the actual sear surface right here. Once you start changing the angles and making it more polished and clean, you're also going to get a much better, cleaner break in there. So that is going to do a little bit to give you a better trigger pull. Also, of course, in here, you'll see that finely polished striker block safety, and then having a little bit of a lighter spring in there as well will help bring that pull weight down just a little bit as well. So definitely something to look for. And I've got another one right here I wanted to show you so you can see that difference. See how the factory disconnector is much, much more flat right there? And when I put the Apex one next to it, you can see that the edge is extended just ever so slightly to help pick up that disconnector, or help pick up that trigger bar edge just a little bit faster. So that's actually a different trigger that I'll be doing a review on real soon. So that is some of the reason of how they were able to pick up the performance they did. Of course, with just designing a flat out dead sexy trigger shoe right there as well. Well, let's go ahead and talk about the pulls on this thing and give you guys a really good idea of what this is going to feel like. So way different. So you have very short take up, nice defined wall, very clean break, very short reset right there, and then you're right back at that wall. So again, right there. So pretty sweet wall break. So it's good. Like I said, you can tune this in to your liking. Make sure our trigger gauge is good to go. And we'll go ahead and do 3 pulls. And I do have the heavier spring in here because I carried this from time to time. I want to make sure the trigger spring was not too light. So we are just over 4 pounds and 4 ounces. So as long as we don't get anything crazy, we are right there, 4 pounds directly right there. Do our last one here. So you can see right there, almost exactly 4 pounds again. And any difference in the pull weight is going to be just sheer placement of that gauge on the trigger shoe. All right, so you've seen the parts, you've seen how it works. Let's talk about how much this is actually going to cost us, and really is it worth it? If there was one thing that I could do to the M&P, it would be that trigger. It is legitimately that good. Everyone compares it, saying it's the closest thing you're going to get to a 1911 trigger out of a striker fired gun. And I think that's a legitimate thing to say. This trigger is definitely next level. I've got one in every M&P I own, dating back to the first one. I did think I did like the Floyd's custom slide and stuff. I'll link that down below if you want to check it out. Old video, don't judge me on it. But talking about this thing, giving you all of the performance of the metal aluminum machined one for almost half the price. It's a little under half, something like that. So it's like, I think it's like $160-ish for the aluminum trigger shoe kit. And this full kit is coming in as of today, checking it out, 95 bones. And like I said, I'll have a link at the build list. 95 bucks is pretty solid, especially when you know everything that went into this, all of the parts that come with it, the springs, the way it's set up. It's not just like kind of a trigger shoe and a trigger bar like you would for a Glock. So this is like an entirely different kit. So for $95, that's probably the most performance you're going to get when it comes to anything on the M&P series pistol for that price. I mean, think about it, you're under $100 still, and there's Glock triggers that are well over $100 that are not quite as much in detail as this one is. And like I said, now that you've seen it, it's gonna live rent-free up in your mind. So that's what I've got for you guys today. I hope you enjoyed learning about that trigger. Like I said, it'll be a link at the builds list for you to check out. If you wanna see any of the original stuff I did on this M&P or the other ones, I'll leave those down in the build list. Feel free to check anything else on the channel. Get subbed up, get belled up, turn those notification icons on, do all that stuff that helps out the channel. And leave me a comment. Would you do a trigger on your M&P, or do you like it just the way it is? You guys get out there on the range, have some fun. Remember, if you stay ready, you ain't got to get ready. I will see you guys on the next one.